Hey everyone, this is Chris DeFerio with Keys to the Shop, and welcome to this bonus Valentine's Day episode. Today's Valentine's Day episode is brought to you by my wife, Lynnsy DeFerio. There is a constant theme in our house where I kind of talk through some episodes and interviews with my wife, and she listens to the shows and always tells me I should share more personal stories. And she came to me with this idea that she would interview me for a Valentine's Day episode. And at first I thought, no, I was kind of resistant to this because it doesn't, I want to keep the episodes very, utility focused. Like I want, action steps that you can take to improve your career and your cafe. And, I relented after a while and thought, what the heck? It's an extra episode, no sponsors, just kind of a bonus and make my wife happy. And that is definitely worth it. So I said yes, and I'm excited that I did because we do get to talk about some cool stuff, She came up with all these questions, and we talk about like my early days in competition, some of my proudest moments, some signature beverages. We talk about some of my most shameful and embarrassing moments in my career, what I'm most proud of, and what I want my legacy to be. And we definitely talk about how coffee brought us together, and a fun story of why I found myself with a headache calling my wife from a payphone in Vegas during Coffee Fest in 2009. So if you've made it this far and that interests you, then please do continue listening, and hopefully you find this entertaining and maybe even useful. I mean, there's some cool things discussed here. So with that said, here we go. Here's my wife, Lynnsy DeFerio, interviewing me for our special Valentine's Day episode. Here we are. And I am sitting underneath a foam fortress here in the recording studio in back room of our house in Louisville, Kentucky, with my wife, Lynnsy DeFerio. Hey, Lynnsy.
Hi.
Welcome to Keys to the Shop. And I'm not really the host of this particular episode. So
no, you're going to let me be the host.
Yes. So I guess
you be quiet.
Hand it to you. I be quiet. Yeah. It's hard to do.
I know it is. Between the two of us, he is by far the talker, or at least the verbal processor.
That's it. I was going to say verbal processor.
Yes.
It sounds much better.
It does sound better. So anyway, I am super excited that he agreed to this. This idea actually came from my friend Tammy. She gave me the idea, and I told her there's no way that he would agree to this. And she's like, well, it can't hurt to ask. So when I asked him, I'm like, okay, you cannot say no to what I'm going to ask you. You have to think about it first. So anyway, we are here because he thought about it and he came back and he said, okay.
I'm getting soft in my old age, I think.
Yes, we've been married for 11 years, so I have definitely softened his rough edges in that amount of time. So anyway, I think this will, I'm a little biased, but I think it'll be interesting because, like he said, I know his show is about just highlighting others, and I'm always, I listen to all of his episodes and I'm always telling him, oh, you should have shared that story about you at this moment. And he's always saying, it's not about me, it's about my guest. And so I do think he has so many cool stories and he is very interesting. And, I know personally, I listen to a lot of podcasts and I love it when the person that you listen to over and over every week, as you listen to them more, you get to know them. They share personal stories about their life. At least females do that more. So I have always told my husband, you need to share more about your life. I think people really would love to learn more. So that's what this episode is going to be about. Learning a little bit more about Chris DeFerio.
Hey, maybe I'll learn something.
Yeah. So, okay. So the first question is, oftentimes when I get asked what your husband does and I explain it, a lot of times people say to me, oh, I didn't even know you could make a career out of coffee. So, and I didn't know that either when I first met him. So anyway, so my first question is, why did you choose coffee 20 years ago?
Oh, okay. Well, classic question. I
Yes, you
may
ask
have
all your
touched
guesses.
on this a tad in the intro episode, which, anyone listening now is probably not taking the time to go back and I'll have to look at the stats. But yeah, that's ages ago. So anyway, 20 years ago, I got into coffee because I just kind of fell in love with the coffee shop atmosphere, and I was really infatuated with the it was caffeine a little bit, honestly, discovering coffee, because it really led to a lot of creativity on my part. I feel like I'm a creative person, and going to a coffee shop and journaling and drawing and drinking coffee was sort of the gateway for me. And that was way back in Northwest Arkansas. After I had finished a ministry school out there, I just kind of had jobs in town and went to coffee shops, and that's when I fell in love with coffee. And I remember feeling like it was more than the atmosphere, because I started to learn that I could taste the differences between all of the origins on the batch brew. And that kind of led me down this rabbit hole of discovering coffee as a commodity, as an industry. I started to read books about it and, get subscriptions to coffee magazines and stuff. And at the time, the coffee magazine to me was the catalog from Vermont Green Mountain Coffee. And I was just wanting to, learn and absorb a lot of stuff about coffee. But I got into it in sort of a, I don't want to say accidental way, because I was just sitting there one day and figuring out what I wanted to do with my life, as a lot of, 20, I think it was like 21 years old at the time. Yeah. And I said, well, I love coffee, and I'm always, reading about it and thinking about it. So I'm just going to do that. And that's literally all it took for me to decide. And from that day forward, I never looked back. I never really questioned my career choice. I just decided that if I was going to do it, I was going to keep doing it until, something like physically prevented me from doing it. And so far that hasn't happened. And here we are 20 years later. That's kind of a short version.
That's true. Okay, so next question is, first, I had the privilege of working side by side with my husband when we lived in upstate New York before Louisville. And that was my first introduction as a barista. And so it was good for me to see all the ins and outs of what it means and, kind of what, he does. But, to be honest, he was a little intimidating to work with, but at the same time, and I think anyone who has ever worked with him or works with him currently at Quills would attest to this. I always felt like working with him was the equivalent of working with two other baristas. And it's mostly because he is a super clean freak. He's cleaning as he goes like a machine. He times himself. In the past, he's always timed himself doing dishes. So he's super fast with dishes. He's just the most efficient person behind the bar that I've ever seen. And so, usually people like working with him because he just gets so much done compared to the normal barista. But my question for you is, I know cleaning is probably going to be your answer, but outside of cleaning, I mean, seriously, he doesn't love to clean at home, but he does love to put everything in right angles at home. He's always just tweaking things on our kitchen counter or his desk. Sorry, this question is really long. Okay, go back to the question. My question is, besides just cleaning and loving a clean bar, what about barista work do you love the most?
I think, first of all, I want to point out that it's not just the fact that I'm clean. I like to be clean. And I do time myself still on dishes and drinks and things like that. I think that's fun, and it's productive. So anyway, I'm also very. I also bless my coworkers with puns, so I.
That's true.
That's another reason. I just wanted to put that in there. But I think the intimidating thing that you mentioned earlier. This is not the answer to your question, but I'll get there. That's something I actually have talked about on the show before. That I guess I can be intimidating because I have a. This is actually related. So great. I have a vision for how I want something to be, how I think somebody should experience what is being presented. And I think that vision for how something can be enjoyed and presented is part of what drives me to work in coffee, not just because I enjoy it, because I also want to work to stock and prepare and clean and create and present a coffee experience that's the sum of all of these little parts. And the reason why Keys to the Shop has so much variety in it is because there's so many moving parts that are going into a coffee shop, and being a barista, it's just like fine tuning a machine. In a way, you kind of have to become intuitively connected to the machine. So I guess being like a machine working as a barista makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. So I think what I love about it is that it might be a little zen-like working on a vehicle, or learning an instrument and mastering that. So there's some mastery to it, but there's a lot of satisfaction in putting your hand to something that other people have put their hands to, like just coffee itself, and knowing that you've done as good a job as you possibly can with the tools you've been given, and in that context, you've done well by the people you're serving in that moment. I think that's sort of the thing that a lot of us are chasing. And so, I think that's what I love the most about it. To wrap that up, I think on the Loving the Closing Shift episode, I was kind of waxing poetic about the idea of just taking one final look at the cafe before you turn the lights off, before you leave. For me, that's kind of like when you open a coffee bag and you smell the beans on the inside. And I love that. I think that we should sell that smell in the shop. We should charge people for like the first smell of an open bag.
People do love it.
Yeah. But that's the kind of satisfaction I get from looking out in a thing and saying, hey, we did something good here, and we cleaned well, we created well, and we served well.
Yes, and a side note, because, he trained me how to do a close, my very first close in this tiny, I don't even know how big that cafe was, but a super small cafe, I closed by myself, and my first close took me 4 hours.
Not well,
because I did everything that he told me to do, but I'm just not fast or efficient because it was my first time. But it was hilarious that it took me 4 hours in this tiny cafe.
I feel, and that was your first time closing, so you were just under this pressure to is it crisp clean, I guess? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I do have a tendency to be thorough when I do something, but that was a little ridiculous. Anyway, that's the side note.
You got better.
I did. I got a lot better. Okay. So when we met back in 2008, you were kind of at the tail end of doing competitions. So I only got to see one of your competitions, but in all of them in your, lifetime, what was your favorite moment?
I think my favorite moment was, what was it? Maybe, so I think predictably the answer to this would be when I did well in competition. And that would be in 2007 when I was fourth place in the USBC. And what I really loved about that particular presentation was that I was able to do two things. One, I had created a blend called the Friends Blend, which consisted of 4 beans. I couldn't even tell you what origins they were. I think it was like Peru, Guatemala, Papua New Guinea, and Honduras. But I didn't have control over it. I just told 4 people who were roaster friends of mine to send me their best coffee that they really loved, and I've happened to get 4 different origins. And I mixed them myself and created this Friends blend that actually tasted good. It was a miracle because the next year I did the same thing and it tasted terrible. So that was nice that the stars aligned that way. I also used my competition to talk about community a lot. And I remember one of the songs I played was Orange Sky by Alexi Murdoch, kind of a folk singer type guy that was brand new on the scene back then. And I had a campfire signature beverage that I created to that song. And that story was really cool because I'd won in 2007. I had won the Northeast Regional Barista competition. And one of the judges suggested more smokiness in my drink, which was basically like a spiced chocolate with espresso and some other ingredients. It really escapes me right now. But he wanted more smoke in there because I had smoked vanilla in the beverage. And so I thought, I don't know how to get more smoke, but I was reading a lot about the culinary world at the time, Michelin star chefs and people like that. And Grant Achatz of Alinea in Chicago had been famous for using trapped smoke over the top of a venison dish. And I looked up what he was doing, and it turns out I think that he was just burning oak leaves and then trapping the smoke. But when I was looking at like trapped smoke and things like that, I was found out that he started using something else that was new called the smoking gun. And you can get that at any high-end, culinary home culinary store now. But the smoking gun was brand new back then, and so new that I called the company to buy one for the competition, and they didn't have any left. And so the secretary actually said, I got you one. I just took the prototype off the engineer's desk and sent it to you in the mail.
That's awesome.
And so that was pretty cool. I don't know if that was against the rules. So obviously, I don't know if PoliScience is going to be listening to this, but it was really cool to have that because it was like one of the only ones out there at the time. And I was able to build a whole contraption that filled 4 overturned wine glasses with smoke at the same time, and then trapped my drink in this nice glass dome of, I think it was cedarwood smoke. Not cedarwood, it was like applewood smoke. And that was like a really visual, sensory experience for the judges. And I just love creating that experience. Mm-hmm. I think that's like a long-winded answer to this. And I think it's my favorite because not only did all the stars align and I was able to create this and did well, but I did well talking about the community. And I did well using the Friends blend. And so that for me was peak. And, it was kind of all downhill from there, honestly.
And you've promised to create this drink for me. In 11 years, you still have not done that for me. So
I forgot. You just reminded me now that I said that.
Before we hit 20 years, you need to make that drink for me.
Oh, I have all the stuff still. I have to take it out of the garage.
Right. Another one of my favorites that you've done, I don't remember
the blue spruce?
Yes, the blue spruce, because that was after I met you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. You want me to describe that?
Just explain it a little bit, because I think it's so unique.
Harvesting, I think it was espresso, and it was, I think I used smoked vanilla again in this one, smoked vanilla. But it was a 2-part drink. The one part was the espresso next to a glass of whipped cream that had been infused with New York maple syrup and blue spruce needles. That was just made by taking baby blue spruce needles, stripping them off of the stem, blending them with cream, and steeping it for like 48 hours, and then straining it after a lot of pressing. I'm just giving you the recipe now, and then whipping it with some maple syrup. And it had a nice pine taste that wasn't overwhelming because the needles were not mature. And so because of that, they didn't have a lot of bitterness. And at the time, I was trying to figure out whether I was going to use another type of resiny, a resin product that's from Greece called mastic, that's used in some kind of pine-flavored candies in Europe and Greece, and I couldn't really get my hands on any. So I just went to my friend's yard. He said it was okay to take some needles off his tree, and that's the way it happened.
And let me tell you, it is the most incredible flavor. I've always wanted to move somewhere where we have a blue spruce in our backyard just so we can make this cream. It was the most unique flavor I've ever tasted, and we've never done it since. So we need to add that too.
I might be traumatized by competition because there's all these things that I never do again.
Right. Okay. All right. Moving on. So I know, since I've known you, that you've had some public embarrassing moments.
Oh, I know too, yeah.
Yeah. But related to coffee, not just in general, publicly embarrassing moments.
Yeah, let's just keep the coffee.
Not like the time that, remember you were standing on the corner in a hoodie and a whole bunch of cops came up because some lady drove past you and told the cops that you were the person that
like broke into her house or something.
Right.
Yeah, it was weird.
Not that embarrassing moment. Okay, related to coffee. Share one of your embarrassing moments.
In coffee. Okay. Yeah. Here's a good one. Well, there's two. Okay, there's two embarrassing moments. And one is competition. The other is just being a complete jerk. So my first one was an out-of-region competitor in the Southeast Regional Barista Competition. I think it was in 2005. And I went down there just to practice. Went down there with my friend Luke Damiani of Damiani Coffee Roasters in Pennsylvania. So shout out to Luke for making the trip with me, and super excited. I mean, you can imagine, like early 20s, road trip, coffee competition. We're just like having a great time. I have this whole complicated setup with a bunch of trays, not trays, but planks. Competition's always about planks. There's so many planks in competition. Wood, slate. It's just it's a wash with planks. So I had my set of wooden planks and glassware, and at the time you had to give the judges like sugar and spoons and napkins and set up with a tablecloth and all of that stuff. So I had like a picnic of coffee with me, right? And all of this this crescendoed with me going on stage and promptly breaking one of my signature drink glasses, of which I only had 4, mind you. I didn't think to bring extras. So I had got everything set up just fine, but I failed to actually consider the hypotheticals, like what if this happens? So I served one to each judge of the first 3, and I told the 4th judge, you'll have to share theirs. And, I thought, well, you guys, that's just what has to happen. Sorry. I mean, there's broken glass on the floor, so we're going to go on. Now, competition is 15 minutes. I was so flustered by this and just being under the pressure of competition that I went overtime, and they won't DQ you at that time. They'll let you keep going, and I did. It was 23 minutes. The whole competition took 23 minutes. And
that was a record, right?
It was a record for the longest overtime ever in the history of that competition. I remember 2 years or so afterwards, a poor guy next to me in the prep room actually beat that, but I don't think I had the heart to tell him that he got the record. But
that was probably good.
Yeah, it was a good thing. So yeah, that was embarrassing, but I came back from it and did well the following year and the year after that, and just learned my lesson.
Yeah, that's great.
Fast forward to like 2008 or 9, I think. I have a blog, and on my blog, I was in latte art competitions at this time, and I was like winning them and becoming known for latte art. thanks to a DVD, Extreme Barista from Bellissimo. If you want a good laugh, you should buy that. So
yes, he has full head of hair.
Oh yeah,
it's so funny.
It's a reversal. There's hair on the head and none on the chin. It's great.
And I swear he does bedroom eyes in this video too, with the camera. It's so funny.
You know, it's up close and personal latte art. It's intimate. Anyway, weird. So I have a blog and I go and I compete in Chicago, and I competed against a lot of intelligentsia folks. And I won, and I was so excited, and I was also really full of myself. And so I noticed that nobody came up to congratulate me for winning, and I was so incensed at the time. I thought, wow, like it was anticlimactic for me. So, you know, what was me? Pity party time for Chris, right? And I took to the blog, and I don't know exactly what I said, but I called them out for it for some reason on my blog.
Oh, no.
And it was just the biggest, like, what a twerp. I mean, it was probably the most embarrassing thing I'd ever done publicly, I think, in coffee, because it threw people under the bus who actually the next morning looked to my blog, were excited because I had won. They were excited. They just didn't congratulate me at the time. And I was just like so ego driven at the time. Word of warning to latte artists, man, you know, these things will make you just an egomaniac, I think, for competition in general. But I remember I was on the phone shortly thereafter because I realized what a jerk I was, because Doug Zell, the CEO, the founder of Intelligentsia, actually reached out to me and to ask me about it, and I was so ashamed and apologetic, and I apologized to everybody that was involved in that. I mean, you can't really take something like that back,
right? Because
that was the perfect combination of just forehead slapping decisions. So anyway, all that to say, those are embarrassing things that I did, and I'm a better person now because of them, especially having a platform like a podcast, because you can't take things personally. You have to realize that people are they're not only are they busy, but they probably have the best of intentions most of the time. And I find that to be true with most of the people I talk to. So anyway, adventures in stupidity. I think that's a good way to sum up that period of my life.
Okay, so this, Chris, you do have extreme things happen to you in life. Most people listening don't realize that you were ran over by a car at age 19, which was his own fault because he was riding on the hood.
Yeah, I don't do that. Usually people go inside the car before riding.
Right.
Yeah.
We won't go into that, but he almost died. But anyway, so my scariest coffee moment for you was what happened in Las Vegas.
Oh, it stays in Las Vegas. We can't talk about that. I'm kidding. Joking. Well. No, okay. I guess you want me to go into the story.
Just share the story and then we'll move on.
Okay. I'll try to keep this quicker than the other ones. And for all of you listening, I hope that this is an extra episode. I hope you find this interesting because I'm just so self-conscious about doing this. If
not, at least it's fun for the two of us to do this.
Yeah, that's right. So it is a Valentine's Day episode. So if you don't want to hear a husband and wife banter about these things, then, your fault for tuning in. So anyway,
press the fast forward button.
Yeah. So Las Vegas happened, which was very, very interesting. I had been going back and forth between competing and being a judge at latte art competitions at this time. This is 2009. And in Las Vegas, I was in town. I was there because I was teaching latte art, but they were allowing me to also compete in latte art, which was really cool. And at the time, the prize pot was $5,000. And that was the last time that they ever did it. That they obviously overshot the amount of money they could afford to keep paying latte artists. So I was really happy to, try my hands at this competition. I get there to Las Vegas, and I've got my roller bag, and I get dropped off at the wrong hotel. My fault, because I thought it was like one of these satellite hotels on the same name. Mine was like a mile away. So I was really frustrated. And so rather than, get back on, vehicle, like a shuttle, I decided to just walk. Been sitting all day. I'm on a plane. Let's just walk. It's like dusk. It's still light outside, kind of. And there's lights everywhere. Not a lot of people, though. So I'm just going down the street, and I can see the Hilton Hotel is like a beacon, like right in front of me. And I'm walking past some parking lots. I'm walking past some buildings, and there's tumbleweeds, basically. There's no people. And then all of a sudden, I hear like these footsteps, like multiple footsteps coming from behind me. And I don't know why I thought this, but I thought, oh, somebody's running. I better get out of the way. As soon as I step out of the way, the next thing I feel is fists just pummeling the back of my head. Two guys out of nowhere had run up behind me and just started laying into me. And long story short, I got mugged and got taken for my wallet, my laptop, phone, and what else? I think that's pretty much the trinity of important things.
He told you to keep your suitcase.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I said he picked up my suitcase and said, "What's in here?" And like now I'm being questioned. I said, "No, it's just clothes, man." And he said, "Keep it closed, homie." So I didn't thank him, but I thought, well, that's really great. I'm glad I got to keep my clothes. So I've got this massive headache, got all my stuff taken, not even to the hotel yet. But in the next morning, I'm supposed to do this super early morning latte art shoot for a local TV station at the venue. And I just, because I don't have a phone, I have to get a pay phone. I have to remember your number. It was programmed on my phone.
Right.
And told you that I got mugged. And it must have been pretty scary, I guess.
It was. Not
a phone call you want to hear from your significant other, right?
No.
So, and that was only 1 year into our marriage.
Yeah.
So... And, they never found the guys. The Las Vegas cops, this stuff happens so often. They were really annoyed that they had to deal with it. But good news, I won that weekend. So I got enough money to, purchase a laptop and phone. And that was it. That's the story. And ever since then, it's just this, like... What could happen at a latte art competition? Like I think I've experienced the extreme of that with that story, and I'm just glad to have won.
Yes, that made it worth the trip.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on from your crazy stories, let's get back to coffee a little bit. So what have you discovered about coffee in the last few years that you didn't see or it didn't even exist when you first got into coffee?
I would say probably the most impactful thing for coffee in the recent years, and I'll say recent years as in the last 5 to 8 years, maybe.
Okay.
Back in the day, again, old man phrase just keeps popping up. We weren't weighing anything. We had bathroom scales that we were tamping on to make sure we were doing 30 pounds of pressure for every puck we pressed, But now we've got so much automation that the consistency of our coffee has just crept up there really high. Like our coffee now is way more consistent than it used to be because of the tools that we have at our disposal. That means things like gram scales used for weighing the amount of coffee you're putting into the portafilter. You've got doserless grinders. Now, today, even doserless grinders that will weigh the coffee as it grinds into your portafilter for you. If the trend keeps going the way it is, we're really just going to have to talk to our coffee equipment to get it to make us coffee. We'll be the drivers of this machine, right? But I think that's probably the most significant change what I see, though, as a result of that is, first of all, it's more encouraging for the sustainability of coffee, because consistency in what you give the customer is paramount for driving purchasing decisions, which, it goes upstream to the farmer, and the whole value stream of coffee benefits from coffee shops being more consistent with what they do. In that said, our understanding of coffee can sometimes take a back seat to the recipes of success that we see other people using for coffee. So we use the phrase a lot of times, well, this should taste good because it is this much in, this much out. It's got a TDS of X. It's got a extraction percentage of Y. And if I don't like it, then either the recipe is wrong, or I'm wrong for not liking it, and I need to adjust the way I think, right? And I think that latter one is always kind of been there, but it's a new version of it now. It used to be that people would say, well, I should like this because specialty coffee is cool, when Starbucks was just booming and just coming out, right? People convinced themselves that they loved it. You also notice there's a lot of condiments out there get added to coffee, because part of us knows that we really don't love it as much as we love like covering it up with stuff that makes it palatable. For me, that's like the equivalent of turkey. Like I hate that bird.
Right.
But it's the gravy that makes it better.
The gravy, right.
Right. So this is kind of a diatribe, this is an old man yelling at a cloud stuff. But I think it's encouraging more so than it's discouraging to see a lot of the automation and the controls that we have. It's maybe encouraging because also I see a trend of trying to figure out what's accessible to the customer, not being so obsessed with our own palates, but trying to serve people what they're going to enjoy. That's a great trend, and we kind of got away from that when the third wave of coffee was initially starting to rise, and we're seeing sort of a walking back of some of the super light roasts that we've been putting out there, the very acidic, the acid bomb coffees, and we're trying to say, like, maybe it's not enough to just react against dark roasts. Maybe it's just we need to create coffees that are delicious, truly delicious to a lot of people, and not just to us in the lab on that one day when the grind was just right because it's so light that only I could ever pull it right, So that got away from your question a little bit. So the automation didn't exist back then to the degree it does now. Yeah, we'll see where it takes us.
Well, I think it's cool, since you've been in the industry for a couple decades, you get to see the evolution that a lot of younger baristas are not seeing. So, I guess it's neat to be an old man in this industry for that aspect.
I really want a t-shirt that says it's neat to be an old man.
In coffee.
Or
just old man.
Generally an old man.
And I will say, when we first met, I was that person that always purchased, the grocery store flavored fake creamers, for my coffee, and he would scoff at me. But over the years, he has weaned me down to I don't even need sugar.
International delights.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Right. I'm okay with just black coffee.
Coffee is the original international delight.
Yeah. I guess.
Trademark.
I guess you're right. Okay. So, I personally have been really proud of my husband for all the hard work he has put into this podcast, because when he first told me he wanted to do a podcast, first off, I didn't even know what podcasts were back then. And second off, I thought he was crazy. So it's been neat for me to see how hard he works, and even just the creativity that he brings to it. So many people have commented how they love the variety of subjects. And something that people don't know about my husband, I always say he has the gift of creativity. He never runs out of ideas. I don't know how he does it, but anyway. So with that being said, what has been your favorite thing about doing this podcast?
I would say my favorite thing is recent. It's looking back at the number of episodes that we've done, and all told, like including shift breaks and even this Valentine's Day episode, is getting up to 300. Like very soon, the next couple of weeks, it'll be like 300 actual broadcasts, which is crazy. But when I look back, like on the website at keystotheshop.com, on the episodes page, you like look through all of these people. I'm just amazed at the number of people that I've talked to and the number of subjects that have been covered it's really not laborious to think of things to cover. As you were sort of writing these questions out, you were considering the creativity thing and like running out of ideas. And I think my comment to you was it's like a fish running out of water. You know, I'm in the midst of this industry that has so many, topics that go into it. I can just put my hand out of the window and grab something and put it in there. Of course, everything that we do at Keys to the Shop has to do with retail. So it's not just like talking about coffee farming or cupping protocols and things like that. Although we've covered a couple of those topics, but it's mostly because I love coffee bars so much, and I love what happens at this part of the coffee value stream so much, that looking back over the catalog of things we've covered, there's multiple different episodes that cover similar topics in different ways. And when people tell me that they have used the show to help them either solve a problem, overcome a challenge, open a coffee bar, or reform the way that they manage, or help them in their new management role or leadership role, things like that, that's really rewarding, because that's what I wanted the podcast to do, is to sort of put this information out there as a actionable resource for people to take and then use to create a better retail sector of coffee. And so that's, I think, the most rewarding for me, is to see that kind of momentum, that this like giant flywheel that this podcast is. It has gone from like a little bit of subscribers in listeners in 2017 till today, where it's like 5 times as large as it was, literally. I'm just really, I guess, blessed and honored to reach that many people and get these ideas out there and spread the great ideas of other people that are doing great things in coffee. So all of that, yeah, there's probably more, but that's the main thing I can think of.
That's cool. Okay, easy question. What's your favorite coffee?
Favorite coffee is, wow. What an unfair question. I've probably asked somebody this before. Any coffee, I pick coffee cups based on my mood. So I have a hard time choosing favorites of anything. People in the bar have asked me things like, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite music? I cannot tell you. I have almost no interest in finding out for myself. I even hate personality tests that, tell you what you are. So that's a preface for my answer, but my answer is simply, I tend to like washed coffees that have a kind of a floral, but a little bit of a nutty balance to them as a daily drinker. Now, that could come from, and historically for me, that's come from like Honduras, or it's come from El Salvador or Guatemala. I also appreciate more developed coffees, especially in the cold weather. Like you have kindly given me a subscription from Eastobox, and I've selected just all the blends that are more developed blends from great roasters that have roasty characteristics to them. They have chocolate. They have that some earthiness to them, and I really, maybe as a holdover from my original days in coffee, but I really appreciate that in a coffee, and you can do that well. So I do appreciate naturals, for about like 3 ounces. I can't. For me, it's like cream soda. I just can't do more than a couple sips of that before I'm just like, okay, I'm just tapped out. I'm tapping out. I'm done. So yeah, that's, I guess, a non-answer to your question, and in a way, sort of a escape hatch there. But
okay,
yeah, Papua New Guinea is tasting. There's some really good Papua New Guineas out there.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
Was that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I expected your answer to be.
It's hit or miss with Papua New Guinea.
But you're verbose, like I said in the beginning. So that's good, though. That's good. Another stupid question. Why do you hate coffee ice cream so much?
It doesn't taste like coffee.
I disagree.
Well, it doesn't taste like real coffee.
But it has real coffee in it.
Yeah. I mean,
anyway,
we're
never going to agree on this.
I can bite my finger. I have coffee in me. Do I taste like coffee? No.
All right.
It's for me listen, coffee ice cream is like coffee popsicles, or I don't know. It just, because it's cold, first of all, you can't taste things at a cold temperature that well. So that's kind of my answer about coffee ice cream. And I'm sorry, but maybe technology will make this a reality one day, but I doubt it.
All right. Moving on. Okay, this is a little heavier. What legacy in the coffee industry would you like to leave behind?
I think similar to what I see as the potential of just a coffee bar that I'm working in, why I like to clean and create and present and see the potential. I just want my legacy to be that I contributed to coffee being perceived by the customer in the cafe in a higher, more respected way, in a fun way, in a more satisfying way. And I feel that same way about people working in coffee bars, and maybe even more so, because I want coffee bars to be a great place to work for everybody, including the owners, and the managers and the baristas. So I see a lot of issues in coffee bars. We're all just a bunch of imperfect people. Sometimes that cocktail really it turns toxic. And if my legacy can be offering tools and perspectives and ideas, et cetera, that will help people avoid those things, and at the opposite end of that, help them thrive in the opposites, which is to be healthy and professional and skilled, rested, and excellent in what they do. I want those things for myself. I want those things for others. And so, yeah, I think helping in general would be a great legacy. And it's almost kind of what we all want, in a sense. We want to be a helper. And how people take that and use it is up to them. But I want to have produced enough and presented ideas well enough that people can take it and use it to help them and the people that count on them.
Okay, so last question, seeing how it's Valentine's Day, I thought it would be fun to share how we met, because coffee is the reason why we met and are married. Typically, when we're with friends, I like to share the story because I share a lot more details, but I will spare you guys and I will let him share the short version.
Okay, yeah. So the short version is basically that as I've been talking about my career, it had kind of started with latte art as a central part of what I did. And that meant going to Coffee Fest a lot and teaching latte art. And during one of my sessions, somebody came into my session and videotaped without letting me know they were going to do so. It turned out to be this guy. He was a pastor, actually named Guy. And he eventually just through email hired me to come down to Indiana, in Muncie, Indiana, to train some people down there. And I said yes, and I just flew down to Muncie and did some latte art training with these folks. And that was on a Thursday. Then Friday night, there was at the church that they were having this training at, there was something called Friday Night Cafe, I think. And Lynnsy was a painter, is a painter, but at the time, during this Friday Night Cafe, where people do music, they do pottery, they do food and fun, she was doing painting demonstrations. Like she was finishing works of art that she had been working on through the week, and then would take questions from people that would be watching. And I was behind the bar at this church. They had a coffee bar, and I was making drinks. And I was introduced to Lynnsy by the pastor, and at the time I didn't want a relationship at all, I don't think. And I was introduced to Lynnsy, and as I was making coffee, after I said hello, looked over to her again, and then I think maybe Guy, the pastor, he probably saw me doing that, and a little bit later, a few minutes later, he told me, "Hey, why don't you go take a break, take a latte over to your future wife." And that was, of course, tongue in cheek. He was trying to be funny, and I don't know. I just thought, okay, I'll do that. I walked over, and I didn't bring a latte. I didn't bring a drink at all.
Yeah, you forgot my drink.
I forgot a drink, but we ended up talking for 3 hours, and all of your friends that I didn't know they were watching you, but they were watching you because they knew you, and that was what was happening on your end. On my end, I was just fascinated by you. And I was definitely entranced and wanted to get to know you more. And so I don't know why, exchanged business cards.
Which is so
we
bizarre.
both had business cards, and we corresponded over email for a while. And then we shortly thereafter, through long distance and then my moving to Muncie, got married in that same church, and that had that same coffee bar. So were it not for the fact that I was, a traveling consultant and latte art person, I would never have gone to Muncie, Indiana, probably in my life.
That is very true.
As is the case with most people, actually, regarding Muncie. But
except for David Letterman, because he went to school there.
So that's the story, and that's how kind of we met through coffee. So I'm glad I chose coffee, and I'm glad I chose you.
Well, thanks, honey. Okay, this is dripping sweet.
Yeah.
So anyway, thanks for listening. If you've listened this far, then you must be a real fan, and I appreciate it. I've been trying to get on his podcast for a long time, but I never have any platform, and so I finally did. And thank you for allowing me to be here and interview you. I'll probably never be invited back again.
You did fantastically.
So this is it.
Thank you for allowing me to be here and do interviews.
Yeah, it probably feels weird to be on the other foot, right?
Always. Well, I hope that was as fun for you as it was for me. Probably not. I imagine it was probably more fun for me, but I hope that it was at least a little fun and entertaining and maybe even useful to you. Big thank you, of course, to my wife for all these years. We've been married 11 years. And when you're married to somebody who does coffee for a living, that's a long 11 years. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of ups and downs. And I can't imagine doing this podcast without her support and encouragement. I can't imagine doing life without her by my side. So big thank you again to my amazing wife. Love you, Lynns, and thanks again for the opportunity to do this. And with that, there's really not anything else to say except I hope that you have an amazing Valentine's Day and a great weekend. Thank you so much for listening. And we'll be back next week with our regular programming from Keys to the Shop.